Well, how's everybody doing this evening? Welcome to Sunday Night Bedtime Stories. I do some adjusting on my microphone. It is easily one of my favorite books. Yeah, I apologize. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty. So, but I'm here now, and you're here, and that's what matters. Yes, tonight's story is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. The author's name is Robert C. O'Brien, and it is about finding courage in the smallest of places, or smallest of things, living beings. Yes. Thank you guys for the likes and the gifts. I really appreciate that. Well, Danielle, welcome in. Well, you know me, it takes me usually a good 10-15 minutes before I start reading anyway, so I give people time to filter in. Letha89, yeah, for the longest time that was my only exposure to it, and I love the movie. Oh, already at 28 people. You guys are the bomb. Do kids still say that? Do they still say that things are the bomb? Probably not. That's okay. My daughters are 20 and 18, and what did I say to them once? I told them something it was on fleek. And my youngest daughter looked at me and said, "Dad, don't ever say that again." So now I say it just to drive her nuts. Bomb.com. Nice. I will yes, that's whack. I have called things rad since the 80s, so you can't take that out of me. Dude, that's totally rad. 53 people. Well, welcome in, Buford. I promise we will have a nice relatively calm evening. This is a great book, and a little bit of calm is what I like to bring. Hey, Katie, how are you? Euphoric algae gum. Now that is an interesting username. Your Gen X words are old, Danielle. Yeah. I had to draw the line. I had to draw the line though when my one daughter called me bruh. I'm like, okay, not your bruh. I'm your dad. I believe I've earned it. There we go. Alrighty then. We'll get a couple more minutes here. I'll tell you a little bit about the book. It was first published in 1971, and it was awarded the Newbery Medal in 1972. It was adapted into a movie in the 1980s. I believe that was actually the first movie that Don Bluth produced after leaving Disney Animation. Birth Giver. Oh, God. It really is a beautiful movie. It is one of my all-time favorite animated movies. And honestly, it was better than anything Disney was doing at that time. I will die on that hill. And Dom DeLuise as Jeremy the Crow was fantastic. I absolutely love that movie. No, Secret of Nim is based on this book. The story is largely the same, but there are some narrative differences, but not very many. Yes, Mama Jen, that's gonna be the challenge for me, is to kind of keep the voices straight tonight. Actually, this is probably gonna take us 4 nights. Yes, I believe that is correct. Her name in the movie is Brisby, not Frisbee. Not sure why that change was in there. Another Gen Xer, 1975 represent. Was Fern Gully the one where the little pterodactyl thing? Voiced by Robin Williams. Because the line I remember that was when he falls and goes, gravity works. 1970. Songbird 007, welcome in. Yes, Tim Curry was the bad guy. The bat. That's what he was. He was a bat. I get like Fern Gully and oh God. The hell's a movie? Land Before Time mixed up. 1966. All right. Got the Gen Xers in the house. My people. Hello from Florida. Yes. 1968. 75. Yes, that's us. Now, when in 75? I was May. 65. Nice. 72. There's enough of us in here. We could like start a nursing home. May 15th. I'm May 19th. Nice. Funny story. One of my friends on this app that I met back in 2020 when I started posting on here, 1952. Nice. He says it's gonna be like the old folks' home. We're all gonna be sitting around going, Martha, did you get my water? I need my water. No, Joe, you need to take your pills. I am a Taurus. I am right on the cusp. Well, I appreciate all of the follows. Holy crap, there is 150 of you in here. Well, welcome. So I'm going to get started here in a couple minutes, but for those of you that are new here, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jeremy. I go by Undead Papa on most social media, and I do lives twice a week. Tonight is Sunday Night Bedtime Stories, where we read family-friendly literature. I have read in the past Wind in the Willows, A Wrinkle in Time. We just finished The Borrowers. We did Mouse in the Motorcycle, Phantom Tollbooth, all of those kinds of books. A lot of people have their kids listen on Sunday nights, and it's really a joy. I've been doing this for about 8 months now, 9 months. Hard to say, track of time. I started in July when I got laid off from my regular job. I am a professional audiobook narrator and voice actor. By the end of this, you might not agree with me, depending on how much stumbling I do over the words tonight. Depends if I can keep my holy crap, there are 213 of you in here. Well, this is going to be a good night. Anyway, back on track. I get distracted. Wednesday nights, I also do a live called Storytime with Undead Papa, and that is focused more on science fiction, fantasy, short stories, things like that. I've done Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, all that kind of stuff. And it is a little bit different vibe, but a lot of the same people show up to both. I have not decided if I'm going to add another live to the week. I very well could that because I do have the time. But something I will say, I do offer, I did start just this week offering subscriptions to my channel. You go and check the subscription link in my channel. It is only $2.99 a month. And what that is for is a couple things. One, it helps me keep the lights on. I'm not looking to get rich, but I am unemployed, and doing this, this does help. So I'm not going to be transparent about that. There are some Undead Papa themed stickers that you get to use in chats and replies to videos and things like that. They're fun. I also have a sub-only space where you guys who subscribe will be helping me choose the next books that we do, and we might even do some fun things like have a book club and stuff like that. But it is if you do subscribe, that is wonderful. I appreciate you. If you don't subscribe, that is totally okay. I'm just glad you're here. Part of what I'm doing with these lives is building community. The world is on fire, it feels like sometimes, and things have just gone crazy. But I know people come in here on Sunday nights and on Wednesdays to spend 2 hours and listen to me read because it calms things down. It gives you 2 hours of reprieve before you start your week. And that means a lot to me. One of my favorite things is when the chat is going crazy and I look over and you guys aren't talking to me, you're talking to each other. That's real community building. So I really appreciate that. Anyway, let us get started. We'll turn down the music here. And we will begin. Wow, 255 of you already in here. That is amazing. Well, stick around. Grab a blanket, get cozy, snuggle with somebody, get a nice warm drink, and listen to The Secret of Nim, not The Secret, The Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien. The Sickness of Timothy Frisbee. The Sickness of Timothy Frisbee. Mrs. Frisbee, the head of a family of field mice, lived in an underground house in the vegetable garden of a farmer named Mr. Fitzgibbon. It was a winter house, such as some field mice move to when food becomes too scarce and the living too hard in the woods and pastures. In the soft earth of a bean, potato, pea, and asparagus patch, there is plenty of food left over for mice after the human crop has been gathered. Mrs. Frisbee and her family were especially lucky in the house itself. It was a slightly damaged cement block, the hollow kind with 2 oval holes through it. It had somehow been abandoned in the garden during the summer and lay almost completely buried, with only one bit of one corner showing above ground, which is how Mrs. Frisbee had discovered it. It lay on its side in such a way that the solid parts of the block formed a roof and a floor, both waterproof, and the hollows made 2 spacious rooms lined with bits of leaves, grass, cloth, cotton fluff, feathers, and other soft things Mrs. Frisbee and her children had collected. The house stayed dry, warm, and comfortable all winter. A tunnel to the surface earth of the garden dug so that it was slightly larger than a mouse, and slightly smaller than a cat's foreleg, provided access, air, and even a fair amount of light into the living room. The bedroom, formed by the second oval, was warm, but dark even at midday. A short tunnel through the earth behind the block connected the 2 rooms. Although she was a widow, her husband had died only the preceding summer. Mrs. Frisbee was able, through luck and hard work, to keep her family. There were 4 children, happy and well fed. January and February were the hardest months. The sharp, hard cold that began in December lasted until March, and by February the beans and peas had been picked over, with help from the birds. The asparagus roots were frozen into stone, and the potatoes had been thawed and refrozen so many times they had acquired a slimy texture and a rancid taste. Still, the Frisbees made the best of what there was, and one way or another they kept from being hungry. Then, one day at the very end of February, Mrs. Frisbee's younger son, Timothy, fell sick. That day began with a dry, bright, icy morning. Mrs. Frisbee woke up early, as she always did. She and her family slept close together in a bed of down, fluff, and bits of cloth they had gathered, warm as a ball of fur. She stood up carefully so as not to awaken the children, and walked quietly through the short tunnel to the living room. Here it was not so warm, but not really cold either. She could see the light filtering down the entrance tunnel she could see from the light filtering down the entrance tunnel that the sun was up and bright. She looked at the food in her pantry, a hollowed-out space lined with some small stones in the earth behind the living room. There was plenty of food for breakfast and lunch and dinner, too, for that matter, but still the sight depressed her, for it was the same tiresome fare they had been eating every day, every meal for the last month. She wished she knew where to find a bit of green lettuce or a small egg or a taste of cheese or a muffin. There were eggs in plenty not far off in the hen house, but hens and hens' eggs are too big for a field mouse to cope with. And besides, between the garden and the hen house there was a wide sward of shrubs and grass, some of it grown up quite tall. Cat territory. She climbed up the tunnel, emerging whiskers first, and looked around warily. The air was sharp, and there was white frost thick on the ground and on the dead leaves at the edge of the wood across the garden patch. Mrs. Frisbee set off over the gentle furrowed earth, and when she reached the fence, she turned right, skirting the border of the forest, searching with her bright round eyes for a bit of carrot, a frozen parsnip, or something green. But there was nothing green at that time of year but the needles on the pine trees and the leaves on the holly, neither of which a mouse, or any other animal for that matter, can eat. And then, straight in front of her, she did see something green. She had reached the far corner of the garden, and there, at the edge of the woods where it met the fence, was a stump. In the stump there was a hole, and out of the hole protruded something that looked like a leaf, but was not. Mrs. Frisbee had no trouble at all going through the wire fence, but she approached the hole cautiously. If the stump was hollow, as it seemed to be, there was no telling who or what might be living in it. A foot or so from the hole she stopped, stood still, and watched and listened. She could hear no sound, but from there she could see what the green was. It was, in fact, a yellowish-brownish green, a bit of a sweet corn husk. But what was a sweet corn husk doing here? The cornfield was in a different part of the farm altogether, away beyond the pasture. Mrs. Frisbee hopped closer and then, carefully, crept up the side of the stump and peered inside. When her eyes got used to the dark, she saw that she had found a treasure. A winter supply of food, carefully stored and then, for some reason, forgotten or abandoned. But stored by whom? A raccoon, perhaps? Not very likely, so far from the stream. More likely a squirrel or a groundhog. She knew that both of these felt free to help themselves to the new corn each year, and that they were strong enough to carry ears away and store them. But whoever had done it, why he then abandoned the store? Then she remembered. Back in November there had come from near that edge of the woods and the sound that sends all the animals in the forest shivering in their hiding places. The sound of hunters, guns shooting. The sound that is accompanied for someone by a fiery, stabbing pain, and then he never needs his stored food again. Still, since Mrs. Frisbee did not even know what kind of animal it had been, much less his name, she could not shed many tears over him, and food was food. It was not the green lettuce she had longed for, but she and her children were extremely fond of corn, and there were 8 large ears in the stump, a noble supply for a mouse family. Down under the corn she also could see a pile of fresh peanuts from still another part of the farm, some hickory nuts, and a stack of dried, sweet-smelling mushrooms. With her forepaws and sharp teeth she pulled off a part of the husk from the top ear of corn and folded it double to serve as a crude carrying bag. Then she pulled loose as many of the yellow kernels as she could easily lift, putting them in the husk bag. She hopped off briskly for home. She would come back for more after breakfast and bring the children to help. She backed down the tunnel entrance to her house tail first, pulling the corn after her and calling cheerfully as she went, "Children, wake up! See what I have for breakfast, a surprise!" They came hurrying out, rubbing their eyes in excitement, for any kind of surprise in food was a rare and festive thing in the cold dead of winter. Teresa, the oldest, came first. Crowding close behind her was Martin, the biggest, a strong, quick mouse, dark-haired and handsome like his poor father. Then came Cynthia, the youngest, a slim, pretty girl mouse, light-haired and, in fact, a little light-headed as well, and over-fond of dancing. Where is it? She said. What is it? Where's the surprise? Where's Timothy? Asked Mrs. Frisbee. Mother, said Teresa, concerned. He says he's sick and can't get up. Nonsense. Martin, tell your brother to get out of bed at once, or he'll get no breakfast. Martin ran into the bedroom obediently, but came back in a moment alone. He says he feels sick too. He feels too sick and doesn't want any breakfast, even a surprise. I felt his forehead and it's burning hot. Oh dear, said Mrs. Frisbee. That sounds as if he really is sick. Timothy had on occasion been known to think he was sick when he really was not. Here, you may all have your breakfast, save Timothy's, and I'll go up and see what's wrong. She opened up the green carrying bag and put the corn on the table, dividing it into 5 equal shares. The dining table was a smooth piece of lath supported on both ends by stone. Corn! Shouted Martin. Oh, Mother, where did you ever get it? Eat up, said Mrs. Frisbee, and a little later I'll show you, because there's a lot more where this came from. And she disappeared into the little hallway that led to the bedroom. A lot more, Martin repeated as he sat down with his 2 sisters. That sounds like enough to last till moving day. I hope so, Cynthia said. When is moving day anyway? 2 weeks, said Martin authoritatively. Maybe 3. Oh, Martin, how do you know? Protested Teresa. What if it stays cold? Anyway, suppose Timothy isn't well enough? At this dreadful thought, so casually raised, they all grew worried and fell silent. Then Cynthia said, Teresa, you shouldn't be so gloomy. Of course he'll be well. He's just got a cold, that's all. She finished eating her corn, and so did the others. In the bedroom, Mrs. Frisbee felt Timothy's forehead. It was indeed hot and damp with sweat. She took his pulse and dropped his wrist in alarm at what she felt. Do you feel sick in your stomach? No, Mother. I feel all right, only cold. And when I sit up, I get dizzy, and I can't get my breath too well. Mrs. Frisbee peered anxiously at his face, and would have looked at his tongue, but in the dark room she could see no more than the dim outline of his head. He was the thinnest of her children, and had a dark complexion like his father and brother. He was narrow of face. His eyes were unusually large and bright, and shone with the intensity of his thought when he spoke. He was, Mrs. Frisbee knew, the smartest and most thoughtful of her children, though she would never have admitted this out loud. Bleh. But he was also the frailest, and when colds or flu or virus infections came round, he was the first to catch them, and the slowest to recover. He was also, perhaps as a result, something of a hypochondriac. But there was no doubt he was really sick this time. His head felt as if he had a high fever, and his pulse was very fast. Poor Timothy. Lie back down and keep covered. She spread over him some of the bits of cloth they used as blankets. After a while, we'll fix you a pallet in the living room so you can lie out there where it's light. I found a fine supply of corn this morning, more than we can eat for the rest of the winter. Would you like some? No, thank you. I'm not hungry. Not now. He closed his eyes, and in a few minutes he went to sleep. But it was a restless sleep in which he tossed and moaned continually. In mid-morning, Mrs. Frisbee, Martin, and Cynthia set off for the stump to carry home some more of the corn and some peanuts and mushrooms. The hickory nuts they would leave, for they were too hard for mouse jaws to crack and too tedious to gnaw through. They left Teresa at home to look after Timothy, whom they had wrapped up and helped into a temporary sickbed in the living room. When they returned at lunchtime carrying heavy loads of food, they found her near tears from worry. Timothy was much worse. His eyes looked wild and strange from fever. He trembled continuously, and each breath he took sounded like a gasp for life. Teresa said, "Oh, Mother, I'm so glad you're back. He's been having nightmares and shouting about monsters and cats, and when I talk to him, he doesn't hear me at all." Not only was Timothy not hearing with his ears, his eyes, though wide open, were not seeing. Or if they were, he was not recognizing what they saw. When his mother tried to talk to him, to hold his hand and ask him how he felt, he stared past her as if she did not exist. Then he gave out a long, low moan and seemed to be trying to say something. But the words would not form properly and made no sense at all. The other children stared in frightened silence. Finally, Martin asked, "Mother, what is it? What's wrong with him?" "He's terribly ill. His fever is so high he's become delirious. There is nothing for it. I will have to go and see Mr. Ages. Timothy must have medicine." Oh, we're enjoying so far, I hope. Holy crap. 380 people. Good Lord. I think that's the most amount of people I've ever had in live. That's wild. You guys are amazing. Well, I'm glad you're here. Oh, Watership Down is that's a tough one. And the movie is even more tough. But you're very welcome, Kat. I hope you're enjoying it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Somebody asked me, I think it was last week, I was up to 412. Holy crap. Somebody asked me last week, "You should do audiobooks." And I go, I do. I do. I am going to read. I'm going to keep reading here in a minute. It was one of my favorites too. Wonderful. 421. Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. 421 people want to sit here and listen to me read a story. That's amazing. I've thought about a podcast, but doing a podcast would have to be all public domain stuff. Whereas this, I can kind of get away with reading stuff that's not public domain because I can't republish the live. So, but let us continue. You guys are awesome. Mr. Ages. Mr. Ages was a white mouse who lived across the farm and beyond, in a house that was part of a brick wall. The wall lined the basement of what had once been a large farmhouse. The farmhouse itself had burned down so many years ago that nobody could remember what it had looked like, nor who had lived there. The basement remained, a great square hole in the ground. And in its crumbling walls, protected from the wind and snow, numerous small creatures lived. In summer there were snakes, dangerous to Mrs. Frisbee, but there was no need to worry about them in the winter. Just the same, it was a long, hard journey and could be risky unless she was extremely cautious. It was so far, in fact, that Mrs. Frisbee would not ordinarily have set out so late in the day for fear that the dark would catch her before she got back. But Timothy obviously could not wait until the next day. So only 5 minutes after she had announced that she must go, she was gone. If she had been able to follow her nose, that is, to take the shortest route to where Mr. Ages lived, her journey would have been easy enough. But since that would have led her close to the farmhouse and the barn, and since the cat stalked those grounds relentlessly, she had to plot a much more roundabout way, circling the whole farmyard and sticking to the fringe of the woods. She loped along briskly, moving in the easy horse-like canter mouse use when they're trying to cover ground. Her progress was almost completely noiseless. She chose her path where the earth was bare or where grass grew, and she avoided dead leaves, which would rustle and crackle even under her small weight. Always she kept an eye out for hard hiding places, logs, roots, stones, things to scurry under if she should meet a larger animal who might be unfriendly. For though the cat was number one, there were other things in the woods that chased mice. And as she did all this, she worried about Timothy and hoped that Mr. Ages would know something that would help him. It was more than 2 hours later that she saw she was getting close to the brick wall where he lived. Though her husband had been a great friend of Mr. Ages and had visited him often, Mrs. Frisbee herself had been there only once before, and that had been in summer. Still, she remembered the place clearly. It was an odd sort of clearing in the woods. Long ago, when the old house had been lived in before it had burned, there must have been a wide lawn around it. Over the years, this clearing had grown over with a strange mixture of high, rank grass, tall weeds, berries, and wildflowers. In the summer it was a wild and beautiful place, bright with blooms and full of the smell of blackberry blossoms and purple clover. There were harsher plants as well, spiny thistles and poisonous nightshade, and bees droning everywhere. But in the winter it had a bleak and almost ghostly look, for the blossoms and the green leaves were gone, and only the dry skeletons of the weeds stood, hung with stalks and seeds and pods that rattled in the wind. It was from these seeds and others, and from the flowers and roots beneath them, that Mr. Ages made the draughts and powders that could sometimes save the sick from dying. The time she had been here before, that was for Timothy too, when he was only a baby, scarcely bigger than a marble. He had wandered while playing with the other children a little way from them, and had been bitten or stung by something poisonous. They did not know what to do. When the others found him, he lay curled in a ball, paralyzed and scarcely able to breathe. That time her husband, Mr. Frisbee, had been alive, and between them, taking turns, they managed to carry Timothy to Mr. Ages' house. It was a sad and frightening journey, and when they arrived, they had been afraid he might already be dead. Mr. Ages looked at him, examined his tongue, felt his pulse, and found a small red lump near his back. "Spider," he said. "Not a black widow, but bad enough." He had forced a few drops of milky liquid into Timothy's mouth and held him upright so that it could trickle down his throat, for Timothy could not swallow. In a few minutes his small muscles had unlocked, and he was able to move his arms and legs. "He'll be all right," said Mr. Ages, "but weak for a few hours." The trip back home had been a happy one, and the other children were wide-eyed with joy to see Timothy alive. Yet Mrs. Frisbee thought that this had been the beginning of his frailness. From that time on he tended to stumble a little when he walked, especially when he was tired. He never grew as big or as vigorous as his brother Martin, but he thought a great deal more, and in that resembled his father. Now she reached Mr. Ages' house. a hole in the brick wall where one end of a heavy floor beam had once rested. It was about 2 feet below the top of the wall, and one reached it by climbing down a sort of rough stairway of broken brick ends. She knocked on his door and made of a piece of shingle. "Oh, let him be in, please," she thought, but he was not. There was no answer, so she sat down to wait on the narrow ledge of the brick in front of his door. Half an hour passed, the sun sinking lower in the west all the time, before she heard a slight scratching noise up above. And there he came, carrying a cloth sack bulging with some kind of lumpy material. His fur was a soft gray-white and glossy, and so glossy he seemed almost to glow. Mrs. Frisbee had heard that Mr. Ages was not truly a white mouse, that is, he had not been born with white fur, but he had turned white from old age. Whether this was so or not, she did not know. Certainly he seemed very old, and very wise, yet he walked nimbly enough. "Oh, Mr. Ages, I'm so glad you've come," she said. "I don't suppose you remember me, Mrs. Frisbee?"
"Of course I remember you, and I was sad to hear about poor Mr. Frisbee. How is your younger son? Timothy, is it?"
It's about him I've come to see you. He's taken terribly sick."
"Has he? I was afraid he might turn out to be not as strong as the others."
"I hoped you might be able to help him."
"That may be. Come in, please, so I can put down this sack."
Mr. Age's house, somewhat larger than a shoebox, but about the same shape, resembled the house of a hermit. It was bare of furniture except for a bit of bedding in one corner and a stool made of a piece of brick, and another piece of brick worn smooth from use as a pestle on which he ground his medicines. Along one entire wall, arranged neatly in small piles, stood the raw materials he had collected: roots, seeds, dried leaves, pods, strips of bark, and shriveled mushrooms. To this row he now added the contents of his sack. It held a number of small plants, all of them the same kind, with stringy roots and dark veined green leaves that looked like mint.
"Pipsissewa," said Mr. Ages. "Botanically, Chimaphila umbellata. It stays green all winter, and makes a useful spring tonic. Most people only use the leaves, but I have found the roots even more effective."
He arranged the plants in an orderly pile.
"But that's not what you're here for. What's wrong with young Timothy?"
"He has a very high fever. He's delirious. I don't know what to do."
"How high?"
"So high that he feels burning hot to the touch, runs with perspiration, yet he shivers with cold at the same time."
"Keep him wrapped in a warm blanket."
"I do."
"And his pulse?"
"So fast that you cannot tell one heartbeat from the next."
"His tongue?"
"So coated that it looks purple."
"How does he breathe?"
"He breathes very rapidly, and the air rasps in his chest. He said at first that he could not get his breath."
"But he does not cough?"
"No."
"He has pneumonia," said Mr. Ages. "I have some medicine that will help him, but the most important thing is to keep him warm, and he must stay in bed."
He went to the back of this house, and from a ledge formed by a projecting brick he took 3 packets of medicine, powders neatly wrapped in white paper.
"Give him one of these tonight, mix it in water, and make him drink it. If he is still delirious, hold his nose and pour it down his throat. Give him the second one tomorrow morning, and the third one the next morning. Mrs. Frisbee took the packages.
"Will he get better?" she asked, dreading to hear the answer.
"He will get better this time. His fever will be less on the second day and gone the third, after he has taken all the medicine. But that does not mean he will have recovered. His lungs will still be terribly weak and sensitive. If he gets the least bit cold, or breathes cold air, even a breath or two, the pneumonia will surely come back worse than before. And the second time he may not recover. This will be true for at least 3 weeks, and more likely a month."
"And after that?"
"Even after that he should be careful, though we may hope by then the weather will be warmer." By now the sun was getting low in the west, settling into high mountains beyond the woods. Mrs. Frisbee thanked Mr. Ages and set out for home as quickly as she could go.
"What?" "But, Velma, thank you. I appreciate that. 523 of you? What?"
"Yes, I need the water. Need the water." I am so glad you are all enjoying this. I really, it's important to me. That's very important to me. I feel like you're 10 again. You know, one of the reasons I started doing this is because I miss reading stories to my kids. Hey, Tessa. I didn't see you come in. I miss reading my kids' stories, and so I figured I'd read to you all. Oh, thank you, Nikki. 500. Wow. Holy cow. You guys are amazing. You guys are 350. Well, if that's the case, let's do something. Let's take a look at something real quick here. Boop. Okay. I want you all to look at this. 6,230 people. What? That's what? Oh my goodness. That's crazy. Well, okay. So, look for it coming up. I will be doing a special live now that I've hit 6,000 followers, where I have some guest readers. Oh, over on YouTube, Sack Geek Girl. That's awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for letting me know. It seems like I'm growing over there too, which is awesome. Anyway, but we love TikTok, and we love the TikTok shop. Just want to remind TikTok that I love that. Yes, this book is what The Secret of Nim was based on. I'm glad you found me too. Texas, well, hello, Texas. I believe there are some fellow Texans in here. Well, anyway, you guys are amazing. Thank you to everyone that's here, and I don't know why, Tessa, but yeehaw. I'm not sure. I would pay to hear you actually say yeehaw. London, that's amazing. My youngest daughter actually lives in Liverpool, so I have ties to the UK. She's slowly teaching me the Scouse accent, which is really kind of funny. Central Texas. Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
it was last week. I had people in here from Norway, which was really cool. I had somebody in here a couple weeks ago from Portugal, which is also really cool. So I am going to continue on. We have over an hour left to read, so we're definitely doing good. I am in Western New York, home of the best pizza in the country, and that's a hill that is a hill I am willing to die on. Well, hello, Syracuse. Welcome. Anyway, okay, I could sit here and talk to you guys all night. So, but let me. Yes, it is Frisbee in the book. They did change it to Brisbee in the movie. I know I read somewhere that it was Brisbee in the movie, but yes, Buford, Rochester, New York, my home away from my home, not my home away from home. I live here. Yes, it's my home. I love home of the garbage plate. Yes, best pizza on the planet. Everybody's like, "Oh, New York City pizza." No, I like my pizza to have a little bit of structural integrity. Shouldn't have to fold it in half in order to eat it. I know I'll get a lot of hate for that one, but yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna keep going. I am so glad and so grateful that you all are here. All right. The Crow and the Cat. Mrs. Frisbee looked again at the sun and saw that she faced an unpleasant choice. She could go home by the same roundabout way she had come, in which case she would surely end up walking alone in the woods in the dark, a frightening prospect. For at night the forest was alive with danger. Then the owl came out to hunt, and foxes, weasels, and strange wild cats stalked among the tree trunks. The other choice would be dangerous, too, but with luck it would get her home before dark. She would take a straighter route, across the farmyard between the barn and the chicken house, going not too close to the house, but cutting the distance by half. The cat would be there somewhere, but by daylight, and by staying in the open, away from the shrubs, she could probably spot him before he saw her. The cat, he was called Dragon. The farmer Fitzgibbon's wife had given him the name as a joke when he was a small kitten pretending to be fierce, but when he grew up the name turned out to be an apt one. He was enormous, with a huge, broad head and a large mouth full of curving fangs, needle-sharp. He had 7 claws on each foot and a thick, furry tail, which lashed angrily from side to side. In color he was orange and white, with glaring yellow eyes. And when he leapt to kill, he gave a high, strangled scream that froze his victims where they stood. But Mrs. Frisbee preferred not to think about that. Instead, as she came out of the woods from Mr. Age's house and reached the farmyard fence, she thought about Timothy. She thought of how his eyes shone with merriment when she made up small jokes, which he did frequently, and how invariably kind he was to his small, scatter-brained sister Cynthia. The other children sometimes laughed at her when she made mistakes or grew impatient with her because she was forever losing things. But Timothy never did. Instead, he would help her find them, and when Cynthia herself had been sick in bed with a cold, he had sat by her side for hours and entertained her with stories. He made these up out of his head, and he seemed to have a bottomless supply of them. Taking a firm grip on her packets of medicine, Mrs. Frisbee went under the fence and set out towards the farmyard. The first stretch was a long pasture. The barn itself, square and red and big, rose in the distance to her right. To her left, farther off, were the chicken houses. When at length she came abreast of the barn, she saw the wire fence that marked the other end of the pasture,
and as she approached it, she was startled by a sudden outburst of noise. She thought at first it was a hen strayed from the chicken yard, caught by a fox. She looked down to the fence and saw it. It was no hen at all, but a young crow, flapping in the grass, acting most oddly. As she watched, he fluttered to the top of the wire fence, where he perched nervously for a moment. Then he spread his wings, flapped hard, and took off, but after flying 4 feet, he stopped with a snap and crashed to the ground again, shedding a flurry of black feathers and squawking loudly. He was tied to the fence. A piece of something silvery, it looked like wire, was tangled around one of his legs, and the other end of it was caught in the fence. Mrs. Frisbee walked closer, and then she could see it was not wire at all, but a length of silver-colored string, probably left over from a Christmas package. The crow was sitting on the fence, pecking ineffectively at the string with his bill, cawing softly to himself, a miserable sound. After a moment he spread his wings, and she could see he was going to try to fly again. "Wait!" said Mrs. Frisbee. The crow looked down and saw her in the grass. "Why should I wait? Can't you see I'm caught? I've got to get loose." "But if you make so much noise again, the cat is sure to hear, if he hasn't heard already." "You'd make noise, too, if you were tied to a fence with a piece of string, and with night coming on." "I would not," said Mrs. Frisbee, "if I had any sense and knew there was a cat nearby." "Who tied you?" She was trying to be calm. She was trying to calm the crow, who was obviously terrified. He looked embarrassed and stared at his feet. "I picked up the string. It got tangled with my foot. I sat on the fence to try to get it off, and it caught on the fence." "Why did you pick up the string?" The crow, who was very young indeed, in fact, only a year old, said warily, "Because it was shiny." "You knew better." "I had been told." "Bird brain," thought Mrs. Frisbee, and then recalled what her husband used to say. The size of the brain is no measure of its capacity, and well she might recall it, for the crow's head was double the size of her own. "Sit quietly," she said. "Look towards the house and see if you see the cat." I don't see him, but I can't see behind the bushes. Oh, if I could just fly higher." "Don't," said Mrs. Frisbee. She looked at the sun. It was setting behind the trees. She thought of Timothy and of the medicine she was carrying. Yet she knew she could not leave the foolish crow there to be killed. And killed he surely would be before sunrise, just for want of a few minutes' work. She might still make it by dusk if she hurried. "Come down here," she said. "I'll get the string off." "How?" said the crow dubiously. "Don't argue. I have only a few minutes." She said this in a voice so authoritative that the crow fluttered down immediately. "But if the cat comes," he said. "If the cat comes, he'll knock you off the fence with one jump and catch you with the next. Be still." She was already at work with her sharp teeth, gnawing at the string. It was twined and twisted and twined again around his right ankle, and she saw she would have to cut through it 3 times to get it off. As she finished the second strand, the crow, who was staring towards the house, suddenly cried out, "I see the cat!" "Quiet!" whispered Mrs. Frisbee. "Does he see us?" I don't know. Yes, he's looking at me. I don't think he can see you." "Stand perfectly still. Don't get in a panic." She did not look up, but started on the 3rd strand. "He's moving this way." "Fast or slow?" "Medium.
I think he's trying to figure out what I'm doing. She cut through the last strand, gave a tug, and the string fell off. There! You're free. Fly off, and be quick. What about you? Maybe he hasn't seen me. But he will. He's coming closer. Mrs. Frisbee looked down. There was not a bit of cover anywhere near, not a rock, nor a hole, nor a log, nothing at all closer than the chicken yard. And that was in the direction the cat was coming from, and a long way off. Look, said the crow. Climb on my back, quick, and hang on. Mrs. Frisbee did what she was told, first grasping the precious packages of medicine tightly between her teeth. Are you on? Yes. She gripped the feathers on his back, felt the beat of his powerful black wings, felt a dizzying upward surge, and shut her eyes tight. Just in time, said the crow, as she heard the angry scream of the cat as he leapt at where they had just been. It's lucky you're so light. I can scarcely tell you're there. Lucky indeed, thought Mrs. Frisbee. If it had not been for your foolishness, I'd never have got into such a scrape. However, she thought it wise not to say so under the circumstances. Where do you live? Asked the crow. In the garden patch near the big stone. I'll drop you off there. He banked alarmingly, and for a moment Mrs. Frisbee thought he meant it literally, but a few seconds later, so fast does a crow fly, they were gliding to earth a yard from her front door. Thank you very much, said Mrs. Frisbee, hopping to the ground. It's I who should be thanking you, said the crow. You saved my life. And you mine. Ah, but that's not quite even. Yours wouldn't have been risked if it had not been for me and my piece of string. Thinking, Mrs. Frisbee did not argue. We all help one another against the cat, she said. True. Just the same, I am in debt to you. If the time ever comes when I can help you, I hope you will ask me. My name is Jeremy. Mention it to any crow you see in these woods, and he will find me. Thank you, said Mrs. Frisbee. I will remember. Jeremy flew away to the woods, and she entered her house, taking the 3 doses of medicine with her. Pesky ghosts. I wish I could. My voice wouldn't hold out. Oh, Tessa using the stickers. The chapter we're on is called "What's Mr. Fitzgibbon's Plow," and I believe it's like the 4th chapter. Kenzie, I do this every Sunday night. Sunday night bedtime stories. At 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I also do a live on Wednesdays, which is geared towards more science fiction, horror type stuff. Thank you, Buford. I really appreciate that. So that's 2 a week. I do that one at 9 p.m. as well. And, I have heard of the Redwall series, and it is on my list to look up and see. So, speaking of being things on my list, I'm not trying to sales pitch here, but one thing I did, the book I haven't decided what I'm doing next Wednesday yet. At the risk of sounding like a sales pitch, one thing I started doing this last week was offering subscriptions here on TikTok. It's $2.99 a month. You get some special stickers. You may have seen a couple of people use them just now. There is a subscriber-only space in there, and one of the things... No, I won't be able to read the whole book. I'm about 15% through it. I think I'm going to get about 25% through it, and then and then I'll be we'll do this over the course of 4 nights. One of the things with the subscriber only space that I'm planning to do is to help. You guys can help me. Well, one, with the script subscription, keep the lights on, and two, I will be using that space for you guys to help me build and decide what next to read. So I'm really loving building this community, and it's been really just a wonderful thing. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate you, all of you. Seriously, if you subscribe, great. I'd love to have you. If you don't, that is totally cool. I'm glad to have you here anyway, because stories are for everyone. And the subscriptions are just because some people were asking how to help me continue to build what I'm doing here. So I really appreciate you guys for that. Anyway, the Phantom Tollbooth was one of the very first books that we did back last year, and it's one that I'm considering revisiting. So anyway, let us continue, because we've got a whole hour left. Mr. Fitzgibbon's Plow. When Mrs. Frisbee went into her house, she found Timothy asleep and the other children waiting, frightened, sad, and subdued. "He went to sleep right after you left," Teresa said. "He's waked up twice, and the second time he wasn't delirious. He said his chest hurt and his head hurt. But, Mother, he seemed so weak. He could hardly talk. He asked where you were, and I told him. Then he went back to sleep." Mrs. Frisbee went to where Timothy lay, a small ball of damp fur curled under a bit of cloth blanket. He looked scarcely larger than he had when she and Mr. Frisbee had carried him to Mr. Age's as an infant, and the thought of that trip made her wish Mr. Frisbee were alive to reassure the children and tell them not to worry. But he was not, and it was she who must say it. "Don't worry," she said. "Mr. Ages gave me some medicine for him and says he will recover." She mixed the contents of one of the packets in a gray-green powder in water, and then gently shook Timothy awake. He smiled. "You're back," he said in a voice as small as a whisper. "I'm back, and I've brought you some medicine. Mr. Ages says it will make you all right." She lifted his head on her arm, and he swallowed the medicine. "I expect it's bitter," she said. "It's not so bad," he said. "It tastes like pepper." And he fell back to sleep immediately. The next morning, as predicted, his fever was lower. His breathing grew easier, and his heartbeat slowed down. Still, that day he slept 7 hours out of each 8. The next day he stayed awake longer, and on the third day had no fever at all, just as Mr. Ages had said. However, since Mr. Ages had been right in all that, Mrs. Frisbee knew he was sure to have been right in the other things he had said. Timothy was not really strong yet. He must stay in bed, stay warm, and breathe only warm air. During those days she had stayed close by his side, but on the 4th she felt cheerful enough to go for a walk, and also to fetch some more of the corn from the stumps so they could have it for supper. She went out of her front door into the sunshine, and it was surprised to find a spring day waiting for her. The weather had turned warm while she had stayed indoors. February was over. March had come in, as they say, like a lamb. There was a smell of dampness in the air as the frosted ground thawed, a smell of things getting ready to grow. It made her feel even more cheerful than before.
and she walked almost gaily across the garden. And yet, despite the fine warmth of the day, indeed, in a way because of it, Mrs. Frisbee could not quite get rid of a nagging worry that kept flickering in her mind. It was the kind of worry, if you push it out of this corner of your thoughts, pops up in that corner, and finally in the middle, where it has to be faced. It was the thought of moving day. Everybody knows that the groundhog comes up from the deep hole where he slept away the winter, looks around, and if he decides the cold weather is not over, he goes back down to sleep for another 6 weeks. Field mice like Mrs. Frisbee are not so lucky. When winter is over, they must move out of the garden and back to the meadow or the pasture, for as soon as the weather allows, Farmer Fitzgibbon's tractor comes rumbling through, pulling the sharp-bladed plow through the soil, turning over every foot of it. No animal caught in the garden that day is likely to escape alive. And all the winter homes, all the tunnels and holes and nests and cocoons are torn up. After the plow comes the harrow, with its heavy, creaking discs, then the people with hoes and seeds. Not all the field mice move into the garden for the winter, of course. Some find their way to barn lofts, some even creep into people's houses and live under the eaves or in the attics, taking their chances with mouse traps. But the Frisbees had always come to the garden, preferring the relative safety and freedom of the outdoors. Moving day, therefore, depends on the weather, and that is why a fine day set Mrs. Frisbee worrying, even as she enjoyed it. As soon as the frost was out of the ground, the plow would come, and that could happen as much as a month earlier or later, one year than last. And the worry was this. If it came too soon, Timothy would not be able to move. He was supposed to stay in bed. And moving meant a long walk across the field of winter wheat, and up and down the hill to the brook's edge where the Frisbees made their summer home. Not only that, the home itself would be damp and chilly for the first few weeks, as summer homes always are, until early spring turned to late spring and the nights grew truly warm. This was something that Mrs. Frisbee and the children did not ordinarily mind. Moving day, in fact, was normally a gay time, for it marked the end of the gray weather and the frost. It was like the beginning of a summer holiday. But this year, now that Mrs. Frisbee had faced the problem, she did not see any answer except to hope that they would not come too early. In another month, according to Mr. Ages, Timothy would be strong enough. Perhaps she was only borrowing trouble. One warm day, she told herself, does not make a summer. Nor even a spring. She walked on through the garden and saw ahead of her a small figure she knew. It was a lady shrew, a tiny thing scarcely bigger than a peanut, but with a wit as sharp as her teeth. She lived in a simple hole in the ground a few yards away. Mrs. Frisbee met her often and had grown to like her, though shrews are generally unpopular, having a reputation for short tempers and extremely large appetites. "Good morning," said Mrs. Frisbee.
"Ah, Mrs. Frisbee, good morning indeed. Too good is what I'm thinking."
The shrew was holding a stalk of straw, which she now thrust into the earth. It went down easily for 2 inches or more before it bent in her hand.
"Look at that. The top of the frost is gone already. Another few days like this, and it will be all gone. Then we will have the tractor in here again, breaking everything up."
"So soon? Do you really think so?" asked Mrs. Frisbee, her worry returning in a rush, stronger than before.
"He plows when the frost is gone. Remember the spring of '65?
That year he plowed on the 11th day of March, and on a Sunday at that. I moved down to the woods that night, nearly froze to death in a miserable hollow log, and that day came after a week of days just like this." Mrs. Frisbee did remember it. Her family, too, had shivered through those chilly nights. For the fact was, the earlier moving day came, the colder the nights were likely to be. "Oh, dear," she said. "I hope it doesn't happen this year. Poor Timothy's too sick to move." "Sick, is he? Take him to Mr. Ages." "I've been myself, but he was too weak to get out of bed and still is." "I'm sorry to hear that. Then we must hope for another frost, or that tractor will break down." "I wish someone would drive a tractor through his house and see how he likes it." So, muttering, the lady shrew moved off, and Mrs. Frisbee continued across the garden. The remark was illogical, of course, for they both knew that without Mr. Fitzgibbon's plough there would be no garden to live in at all, and there was no way he could turn the earth without also turning up their houses. Or was there? What the shrew had said was meant to be sympathetic, but it was not helpful. It meant, Mrs. Frisbee realized, that she, too, could see no solution to the problem. But that did not mean there was none. She remembered something her husband, Mr. Frisbee, used to say. "All doors are hard to unlock until you have the key." All right. She must try to find the key. But where? Whom to ask? And then, as if to make things worse, she heard a sound that filled her with alarm. It came from across the fence in the farmyard, a loud, sputtering roar. It was Mr. Fitzgibbon starting his tractor. "5 days. The sound of the tractor did not necessarily mean that Mr. Fitzgibbon was getting ready to plow. He used it for many other things, hauling hay and firewood, for instance, and moving and clearing snow in the winter. Mrs. Frisbee reminded herself of all this as she hurried over to the corner post. That was a very thick fence post at the corner of the garden nearest the farmhouse and the tractor shed. She had discovered long ago that it had, a few inches above the ground, a convenient knot-hole with a hollow place behind it in which she could hide, when she has reason to, and watch what was going on in the yard. The cat, Dragon, also knew of its existence, so she had to look sharply when she came out. She came up carefully behind the post, stared this way and that, and then darted around it and up into the hole. All clear. Mr. Fitzgibbon had backed the tractor out of the big, cluttered shed where he kept it. Leaving the motor idling, he climbed down from the seat and called to the house. In a moment his older son Paul came out, closing the door carefully behind him. Paul, at 15, was a quiet, hard-working boy, rather clumsy in his movements, but strong and careful about his chores. In a few seconds he was followed by his younger brother Billy, who at 12 was noisier and had an annoying habit of skimming rocks across the grass at anything that moved. Mrs. Frisbee did not much care for Billy. "All right, boys," said Mr. Fitzgibbon. "Let's haul it out and see that linchpin." It was just about worn through last autumn, I remember," Paul said. The boys disappeared into the shed, and Mr. Fitzgibbon remounted the tractor. He turned it around and backed it slowly towards the shed so that the rear end
so that the rear end was out of Mrs. Frisby's sight. There was some clanking and clanging inside the shed while Mr. Fitzgibbon, looking over his shoulder, worked some levers on the side of the tractor.
All set?
He shifted the gears and eased the tractor forward again. Hitched behind it, clear of the ground, was the plow. Mrs. Frisby's heart sank. Surely he was not going to start now. But as soon as he had the plow out in the sunlight, Mr. Fitzgibbon turned the tractor's engine off. It died with a splutter, and they all gathered around the plow pitch.
"Sure enough," said Mr. Fitzgibbon, "she's just about ready to shear. Paul, I'm glad you remembered that. If I order it today, Henderson's will have a new one in 3 or 4 days."
"It took 5 days the last time," Paul said.
5, then. It's just about right anyway. It's too wet to plow now. But 5 days like this ought to dry out the ground enough. Let's grease up while we've got it out. Billy, get the grease gun."
In her hiding place, Mrs. Frisby breathed a sigh of relief, and then began to worry again immediately. 5 days, although a respite, was too short. 3 weeks, Mr. Aegis had said, would be the soonest Timothy could be out of bed, the soonest he could live through a chill night without getting pneumonia again. She sighed and felt like weeping. If only the summer house were as warm as the cement blockhouse, but it was not. Whew. I'm paying for not getting my energy drink from earlier. They might try to carry him, but what was the use of that, only to have him sick again after the first night there? She might, she thought, go back to Mr. Aegis and see if he had any ideas that would help. Was there some medicine that would make Timothy get stronger? She doubted it. Surely, if he had such medicine, he would have given it to her the first time. She was thinking about this when she climbed out through the knothole and then slithered down to the ground below, not 10 feet from the cat. Dragon lay stretched out in the sunlight, but he was not asleep. His head was up, his yellow eyes were open, staring in her direction. She gasped in terror and whirled around the fence post to put it between her and him. Then, without pausing, she set out on a dash across the garden as fast as she could run, expecting at any instant to hear the cat scream and feel his great claws on her back. She reached the shrew's hole and considered for a fraction of a second diving into it, but it was too small. Then she glanced back over her shoulder and saw an amazing sight. The cat had not moved at all. He was lying exactly as before, except now one of his eyes was closed. The other, however, was still looking straight at her, so she did not pause, but raced on. Finally, when she was a safe distance away, 2/3 across the garden and nearly home, she stopped and looked again more carefully. The cat still lay there and seemed to have gone to sleep. That was so odd, so unheard of. She could hardly believe it. Feeling quite safe but puzzled, she looked for a better vantage point from which she could see better. By rights she should be dead, and though she had escaped by what seemed almost a miracle, she scolded herself for having been so careless. If the cat had killed her, who would take care of the children? She saw a dead asparagus plant, stiff, tall, with branches like a small tree. She climbed it and from near the top looked back to the farmyard. Mr. Fitzgibbon and his sons had finished greasing the tractor and gone on somewhere else. But the cat still lay on the grass, seemingly asleep. Why had he not chased her? Was it possible, close as she had been, He had not seen her? She could not believe that. The only explanation she could think of was that he had just finished a very large meal and was feeling so stuffed and lazy he did not want to take the trouble to get up. But that was almost as unbelievable. Certainly it had never happened before. Was it possible that he was sick? Then, on what had already been a day of oddities and alarms, she noticed something else strange. Beyond the cat, quite far beyond, between the barn and the house, she saw what looked like a troop of dark gray figures, marching in columns. Marching? Not exactly, but moving slowly, all in line. They were rats. There were a dozen of them, and at first she could not quite see what they were up to. Then she saw something moving between them and behind them. It looked like a thick piece of rope, a long piece, maybe 20 feet. No, it was stiffer than rope. It was electric cable, the heavy black kind used for outdoor wiring and strung on telephone poles. The rats were hauling it laboriously through the grass, inching it along in the direction of a very large wild rosebush in the front corner of the yard. Mrs. Frisbee quickly guessed where they were taking it, though she could not guess why. In that rosebush, concealed and protected by dense tangles of fiercely sharp thorns, was the entrance to a rat hole. All the animals knew about it and were careful to stay away. But what would rats want with such a long piece of wire? Mrs. Frisbee could not imagine. Even more curious, how did they dare to pull it across the yard in broad daylight, when the cat was right there? The rats were bigger than Mrs. Frisbee and could be, when necessary, dangerous fighters, but they were no match for Dragon. She watched them for quite a long time. It was obvious that they knew exactly what they were doing. And they looked as well drilled as a group of soldiers. They had about 25 yards to go to reach the rosebush, as if at a signal, which, however, she was too far away to hear, they would all pull together, moving the wire about a foot. Then they would pause, rest, and heave again. It was about 20 minutes before the first rat disappeared into the bush, and a little later the last bit of wire disappeared behind them like a thin black snake, and Mrs. Frisbee climbed down from the asparagus bush. All that time, the cat had slept on. The cat got roofied. Oh, that's not funny. But it's funny. Wow. Okay. I gotta stop looking at these numbers because this is blowing my mind. 698 new followers? What? Well, let's check the stats, shall we? Turn the goal meter on again. Holy crap. I'm going to leave that on. I'm going to leave that on. What is going on? This is my biggest live ever. Absolutely ever. You guys are amazing. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Thank you. I must have picked a good one. I did. This is a great book. I love this book. Oh my goodness. You guys are crazy. You guys are all nuts wanting to follow me. Oh, man. Well, I guess I should continue. I am going to keep reading Fantastic Miss Foxy. Absolutely. In the book, it is Frisbee. The movie, it was Brisbee. I heard once that there was what the reason was, why they changed it, but I cannot remember for the life of me. I'm sure somebody knows or can look it up. Oh, Sophie, I'm glad you're here listening from the UK. My daughter actually lives. My youngest daughter lives in Liverpool. Oh, yep. We are about 20% into the story. I expect that we'll be about 25% when we're done tonight. We've got about another half hour, and because of the toy, I did not know that. See, I thought that might have been what it was. Okay. Yes, I do two lives a week. I do this one tonight. This is Sunday night bedtime stories. Awesome. I will have to tell my daughter that somebody near Liverpool was on my live. She'll think that's awesome. So cool. Yeah, which is crazy, but trademark infringement. You're in Liverpool. Awesome. My daughter is in Roby, in fact. So she was telling me the other day that her and her friends will occasionally look at each other and go, "You want to go steps?" And I'm just like, I don't know what that is, but they told me, and it's funny. Oh boy. So anyway, I'm going to keep reading. Sit back and relax and enjoy. Got another half an hour. A favor from Jeremy. In her worry about moving day and watching the tractor, the cat, and finally the rats, Mrs. Frisbee had forgotten that she had set out originally to get some corn for supper. Now she remembered it, so instead of continuing to her house, she turned towards the far corner of the garden and the stump at the edge of the woods beyond. She was a little tired after her dash from the cat, so she walked along slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun and the smell of the breeze. This mild breeze, carrying the moist essence of early spring, caused a dead leaf to flutter here and there. And across the garden near the fence it moved something that sparkled in the sunlight. This caught the corner of Mrs. Frisbee's eye. She glanced at it, saw it was only a bit of tin foil, or aluminum foil, blown from somewhere, and she looked away again. Then she looked back, for at that moment a black object plummeted from the sky, and she recognized her friend, Jeremy the Crow. A thought crossed Mrs. Frisbee's mind. She changed direction again, and moving more quickly, ran across the earth to where Jeremy stood. He was hopping around the shiny piece of foil, eyeing it from one direction and another. What had occurred to Mrs. Frisbee was although Jeremy was not the brightest of the animals she had met, and though he was young, he knew things in places she did not, and one had to begin somewhere. As she approached him, he picked up the foil in his beak and was spreading his wings to fly off. "Wait, please," she called. He turned, folded his wings, and then replaced the foil carefully on the ground. Hello. You remember me?"
Of course, you saved me from the cat. Then he added, What do you think of this piece of foil? Mrs. Frisbee looked at it without much interest. It's just a piece of foil, she said. It's not very big. True, but it's shiny, especially when the sun strikes it just so. Why are you so interested in shiny things? Well, really, I'm not. At least not very. But I have a friend who likes them, so when I see one, I pick it up. I see. That's very thoughtful. And would the friend be female? As a matter of fact, yes, she is. How did you know? Just a guess, said Mrs. Frisbee. Do you remember saying once that if I needed help, I might ask you? I do. Any time. Just ask for Jeremy. Any of the crows can find me. And now, if you will excuse me, he bent over to pick up the foil again. Please don't go yet, said Mrs. Frisbee. I think perhaps you can help me now. Ah, said Jeremy. What kind of help? Are you hungry? I'll bring you some seeds from the barn loft. I know where they're stored. No, thank you, said Mrs. Frisbee. We have enough to eat. And then she told him, as briefly as she could, about Timothy, his sickness, and the problem of moving day. Jeremy knew about moving day. Crows do not have to move, but they keep a close watch on such activities as plowing and planting so as to get their fair share of what's planted. And with their sharp eyes they see the small animals leaving before the plow. So he clucked sympathetically when he heard Mrs. Frisbee's story, cocked his head to one side, and thought as hard as he could for as long as he could, which was about 30 seconds. His eyes closed with effort. I don't know what you should do, he said finally. I'm sorry, but maybe I can help even so. At least I can tell you what we do when we don't know what to do. We? The crows, most of the birds. What do you do then? Over that way. Jeremy nodded in a direction of the deep woods and faraway mountains that rose beyond the fence. About a mile from there grows a very large beech tree, the biggest tree in the whole forest. Near the top of the tree there is a hollow in the trunk. In the hollow lives an owl who is the oldest animal in the woods. Some say the world. When we don't know what to do, we ask him. Sometimes he answers our questions. Sometimes he doesn't. It depends on how he feels. As my father used to say, what kind of humor he's in. Or possibly, thought Mrs. Frisbee, on whether or not he knows the answer, but she said, Could you ask him for me, then, if he knows of any help for me? She did not think it likely that he would. No, Jeremy said. That won't do. That is, I could ask him, but I don't think the owl would listen. Imagine a crow come to ask for help for a lady mouse with a sick child. He wouldn't believe me. Then what's to be done? What's to be done? You must you must go yourself and ask him. But I could never find the tree, and if I did, I don't think I could climb so high. Ah, now, that is where I can help, as I said I would. I will carry you there on my back, the way I did before, and home again, of course. Mrs. Frisbee hesitated. It was one thing to leap on a crow's back when the cat is only 3 jumps away and coming fast, but quite another to do it deliberately and to fly deep into a dark, unknown forest. In short, Mrs. Frisbee was afraid. Then she thought of Timothy and of the big steel plow blade. She told herself, I have no choice. If there is any chance that the owl might be able to help me, to advise me, I must go. She said to Jeremy, Thank you very much. I will go and talk to the owl if you will take me. It is a great favor. It's nothing, said Jeremy. You're welcome, but we can't go now. Why not? In the daytime, when the sun is out, the owl goes deep into the hollow and sleeps. That is, they say he sleeps, but I don't believe it. How could anyone sleep so long? I think he sits in there, part of the time at least, and thinks. That's why he knows so much. But anyway, he won't speak in the daytime, not to anyone. And at night he's out flying and hunting. I know, said Mrs. Frisbee, and that was another reason to be afraid. The time to see him is just at dusk, when lights get dim, he comes to the entrance of the hollow and watches while the dark comes on. That's the time to ask him questions. I understand, said Mrs. Frisbee. Shall we go this evening? At 5 o'clock, Jeremy said. I'll be at your house. He picked up the piece of foil in his bill, waved goodbye, and flew off. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. All right. So this was actually my favorite part of the movie, and scared the hell out of me. Let's find out if it's just as scary in the book. The Owl. Jeremy appeared as promised when the last thumbnail of sun winked out over the mountains beyond the meadow. Mrs. Frisbee was waiting, her heart pounding in her ears, and 3 of the children were there to watch. Teresa and Martin standing beside their mother, and Cynthia, who was afraid of the crow, just a pair of round eyes peering out of the round doorway. Timothy was down below taking a nap, and had not been told about the expedition lest he worry and blame himself for the risk his mother must take. Indeed, the words moving day had not been mentioned in his presence. Even to the other children, Mrs. Frisbee had explained only a part of the problem. That is, she had not told them that there were only 5 days left, nor anything about Mr. Fitzgibbon and the tractor. She did not want to worry them either. Jeremy landed with a swoosh, a bit dramatically perhaps, and nodded at the children and Mrs. Frisbee. "Hello, here I am." Mrs. Frisbee introduced Martin and Teresa and Cynthia's eyes. Martin, who wished he were going on the trip, asked Jeremy in excitement, "How high can you fly?" "Oh, I don't know exactly," Jeremy said. "A couple of miles, I suppose." "Mother, did you hear? You'll be 2 miles up in the air." "Martin, it won't be necessary to go so high on this trip," Jeremy said cheerfully. "No, but I can if you'd like." "No, thank you. I wouldn't think of you taking the trouble." She was trying hard to hide her terror, and Martin had not helped matters at all. But Jeremy suddenly saw that she was trembling and realized that she must be afraid. "It's all right," he said kindly. "There's nothing to be nervous about. I fly over the woods 12 times a day." "Yes," thought Mrs. Frisbee, "but you're not riding on your back, and you can't fall off." "All right," she said as bravely as she could. "I'm ready. Teresa and Martin, take care of Timothy until I get back, and be sure you don't tell him where I've gone." With a small step, she was on Jeremy's back, lying as flat as she could and holding tight to the glossy feathers between his wings. As a horseback rider grips the horse's mane before a jump. Martin and Teresa waved goodbye, but she did not see them, for she had her face pressed against the feathers and her eyes closed. Once again she felt the surge of power as the crow's broad wings beat down against the air. This time it lasted longer, for they were going higher than before. Then the beating became gentler as they leveled off, and then, to her alarm, it stopped altogether. What was wrong? The crow must have felt her grow tense, for suddenly, from ahead, she heard his voice. "An updraft," he said. "We're soaring. There's usually one over this stretch of woods in the evening." A current of warm air rising from the woods was carrying them along. So smooth was the motion that they seemed to stand still, and Mrs. Frisbee ventured to open her eyes and lift her head just a trifle. She could not look straight down. That was Jeremy's back. But off to the right, and a bit behind them, she saw a gray-brown square the size of a postage stamp. She realized, with a gasp, that it was the garden patch, and Martin and Teresa, if they were still there, were too small to be seen. "Look to the left," said Jeremy, who was watching her over his shoulder. She did, and saw what looked like a wide, fearsome snake, blue-green in color, coiling through the woods. "What is it?" she asked in wonder. "You really don't know? It's the river." "Oh," said Mrs. Frisbee, rather ashamed of her ignorance. She had heard of the river, of course, but had not known that it looked like a snake. She had never been there, since to reach it one had to cross the entire width of the forest. There were advantages to being a bird. In a minute more they had left the updraft, and Jeremy's wings resumed pumping. They went higher, and Mrs. Frisbee closed her eyes again. When she opened them, the garden patch had vanished far behind them, and Jeremy, searching the trees below, began a long, slanting descent. Eventually, as he banked sharply, Mrs. Frisbee saw off his wingtip a gray-brown patch among a group of tall green pines. From so high it looked like a gnarled gray bush, but as they circled lower she could see that it was in fact an enormous tree, leafless, skeletal, and partly dead. One huge branch had recently broken off and fallen, and 3 pine trunks lay bent double under its weight. It was a gloomy, primeval spot, deeply shadowed in the gray dusk. Jeremy circled over it one more time, looking at a certain mark 3/4 of the way up the towering main trunk. Just below this spot, another great branch, itself as big as an ordinary tree, jutted out over the tops of the pines, and on this last Jeremy fluttered gently to rest. They were some 10 feet from the main trunk, and Mrs. Frisbee could see, just above the place where the branch joined the tree, a dark round hole as large as a lunch plate. "We're here," Jeremy said in a low voice. "That's where he lives." "Should I get down?" Instinctively, Mrs. Frisbee spoke in a whisper. "Yes, we've got to walk closer, but quietly. He doesn't like loud noises." "It's so high." She still clung to the crow's back. "But the limb is broad. You'll be safe enough." And indeed, the limb was almost as wide as a pavement. Mrs. Frisbee gathered her courage, slithered down, and felt the solid wood under her feet. Still, she could not help thinking about how far it was to the ground below. "There he is," said Jeremy, staring at the hole. "It's just the right time." They inched their way along the climb, Mrs. Frisbee gripping the rough bark tightly, being careful not to stumble. As they came closer, she could dimly perceive a shape like a squat vase sitting back in the hollow of the tree. Near the top of the vase, wide apart, 2 round yellow eyes glowed in the dark. "He can't see us," Jeremy whispered. "It's still too light." Perhaps not. But he could hear. For now a deep, round voice, a voice like an organ tone, echoed out of the hollow trunk. "Who is standing outside my house?" Jeremy answered. "Sir, I am a crow. My name is Jeremy, and I have brought a friend. I hope we have not disturbed you. My friend needs your advice." "I see. And can your friend not speak for himself?" "Sir, my friend is a lady mouse." A mouse, the sonorous voice sounded unbelieving. Why would a crow be a friend to a mouse?
I was trapped, sir, and she set me free. She saved me from the cat.
That is possible, said the owl, though unusual. I have heard of such a thing before. We all help one another against the cat.
True, and now, sir, my friend herself is in trouble.
I understand, said the owl, moving closer to the round entrance of his hollow. Mrs. Mouse, I cannot see you, for the glare of the daylight is too bright. But if you step inside my house, I will listen to what you have to say.
Mrs. Frisbee hesitated. She knew something of the dietary habits of owls, and did not much like the idea of being trapped in his house. She said timidly, Sir, I would not want to intrude, and I can hear you quite well from out here.
Mrs. Mouse, please understand that I have no interest at all as a general rule in helping mice to solve their problems. If you have indeed saved a bird from the cat, I will spare you a few minutes. But I do not discuss problems with people I cannot see. Either come inside, or tell your friend to take you home again.
Behind her, Mrs. Frisbee heard Jeremy whisper very softly, It's all right. He wouldn't harm you in his own home. She whispered back, I hope not. He wouldn't harm you. She walked up the limb to the hollow, climbed over the sill, and stepped inside. Up so close, the owl looked very large. Each of his feathery feet was tipped with 5 gleaming talons an inch long. His beak was curved and sharp and cruel. He blinked his yellow eyes and said, Please step across the room away from the light. Mrs. Frisbee did what she was told. As she grew accustomed to the dimness, she looked around her. The chamber into which she had stepped was spacious, and at that level almost half of the huge trunk was hollow and clean, but the floor was extremely rough. It was not really a floor at all, but only the jagged ends of dead wood sticking up from below, like stalagmites in a cave, so that Mrs. Frisbee had to climb rather than walk as she crossed the room. At the back of the walls narrowed to a corner, and there she saw that the owl had built himself a nest, as big as a water bucket. Twigs and leaves from the top she could see protruding some wisps of feathers, which he had lined it. When she got near this nest, she stopped and faced the owl, who had turned from the light of the doorway and was peering at her with his great yellow eyes. Jeremy was nowhere to be seen. She could only hope he was still waiting on the limb outside.
Now, said the owl, you may state your problem.
Go to the rats. Mrs. Frisbee began nervously trying to arrange her thoughts. It's about my youngest son, Timothy. He is sick, too sick to leave his bed, and moving day is only 5 days off.
Wait, said the owl. Moving from where? Moving to where?
From the edge of the garden patch, where we're living, to the edge of the pasture by the stream.
Which garden?
It had not occurred to Mrs. Frisbee until now that a bird flying freely over miles of countryside would look down on many gardens. It belongs to Mr. Fitzgibbon.
The one with the large stone.
Yes, my house is near the stone.
What makes you so sure moving day will come in 5 days?
Mrs. Frisbee told him about the tractor, about what Mr. Fitzgibbon had said. 5 days until plowing. Of course, she added, it might turn cold again and freeze or even snow.
No, said the owl, sounding quite sure. It will not. The wild onions are already up in the pastures.
He asked her then what kind of house she had, and exactly where it was in relation to the big stone. Apparently he knew the spot well. But the more she talked to him, the more Mrs. Frisbee became convinced that he would produce no solution to her problem. It had been foolish of her to think he could, foolish of her to come at all, because she thought there really was no solution. At last she fell silent, and the owl asked no more questions. Finally he said,
Lying where it does, your house will inevitably be turned up by the plow and probably broken to bits in the process. There is no feasible way to prevent this. My only advice to you is this. If you stay in the house, you will surely be crushed and killed, all of you. Therefore, it is better to take your chances with moving. Wrap your son Timothy up as warmly as you can, help him as much as possible on the journey, and hope for warmer weather on moving day. That way, you are at least sure to save yourself and the other children.
The owl paused, turned away from her, and looked again at the entrance to his hollow. The patch of light it admitted was growing steadily dimmer.
And now, if you will excuse me, the night is falling, and I have no more time to spare. I regret that I cannot give you a more satisfactory solution to your problem. Good evening, Mrs. He paused. I don't believe you told me your name.
Mrs. Frisbee. The poor mouse spoke with a sob in her throat, for the owl had said exactly what she feared he would say, and she had no real hope for Timothy. The owl had said, in fact, either Timothy alone must die, or they must all die together. Even if moving day should be extraordinarily warm, the nights were sure to be frosty, and that would be the end of him. Still, one must be polite, and she added sadly, "Thank you, sir, for listening to me." But at the mention of her name, an extraordinary change had come over the owl. He turned back to face her and stared at her most intently. Indeed, he gave an agitated flutter of his wings, and half flew, half hopped closer to her, bending forward until his great, sharp beak was only a few inches from her face. Mrs. Frisbee shrank back in fear. What had she done wrong?
Did you say Mrs. Frisbee?
Yes, you ask my name.
Related to Jonathan Frisbee?
Yes, he was my husband. He died last summer. He was Timothy's father. But how do you know about him?
That is not important, said the owl, drawing back a little and looking at her in a new way, almost as if with deference. I will say this. His name is not unknown in these woods. And if you are his widow, that puts matters in a different light.
Something in the way he said this caused Mrs. Frisbee's hopes to lift a little. What do you mean?
I mean, madam, there is a way that your son's life might just possibly be saved. I did not mention it to you because I saw no way you could conceivably do it, and I do not want to arouse false hope. But if you are Jonathan Frisby's widow, then perhaps it can be done."
"I don't understand at all," said Mrs. Frisby. "What is this thing?"
"It is not a thing that I can do myself. You must go to the rats."
"To the rats? But I don't know any rats. They have nothing to do with me."
"I don't doubt that. They have little to do with anyone except themselves, and will have less as time goes on. None the less, I think they will help you. And if they will, they can."
"But what can they do?"
"They must move your house to a place where it will be safe from the plow."
Now Mrs. Frisby's spirits fell again, and she said almost bitterly, "You're joking, sir. You're not serious. No rat could move my house. It's far too heavy, much too big."
"The rats on Mr. Fitzgibbon's farm have things, ways you know nothing about. They are not like the rest of us. They are not, I think, even like most other rats. They work at night in secret. Mrs. Frisby, do you know their main entrance?"
"In the rosebush, yes."
"Go there. You will find a sentry guarding the door. His name is Justin. Tell him who you are, and that you came at my request. Tell him that you want to see a rat named Nicodemus. I think they will let you in, though they may insist on swearing you to secrecy. If they should ask that, you must of course use your own judgment. But my advice would be to do as they ask."
Mrs. Frisby was close to complete bewilderment. "Secrecy," she said. "Secrecy about what?"
"That I cannot reveal. I, too, have agreed to it. Also, there is much I do not know, though I have given advice on certain aspects of their projects."
"Well," said Mrs. Frisby, "I don't understand at all, but if it might save Timothy, I will try to do what you say."
"Tell them," added the owl, "that I suggest moving the house into the lee of the stone. Remember that. The lee of the stone. Also, do not forget the names Justin and Nicodemus."
"Justin, Nicodemus, the lee of the stone," repeated Mrs. Frisby. "I will remember." She was now so entirely puzzled that she did not think to ask what the phrase meant. Presumably the rats would know.
"And Mrs. Frisby," said the owl, moving again toward the entrance to the hollow, "please understand. I was an admirer of your late husband, though I never met him in person. I wish you well. I hope your sons can be saved. You see, I can understand your particular need, for I face a similar problem."
"You?" said Mrs. Frisby. "But you have no moving day."
"I have lived in this tree, in this same hollow," the owl said, "for more years than anyone can remember. But now, when the wind blows hard in winter and rocks the forest, I sit here in the dark, and from deep down in the hole, down near the roots, I hear a new sound. It is the sound of strands of wood creaking in the cold and snapping one by one. The limbs are falling. The tree is old, and it is dying. Yet I cannot bring myself after so many years to leave, to find a new home, and move into it. Perhaps to fight for it. I, too, have grown old. One of these days, one of these years, the tree will fall, and when it does, If I am still alive, I will fall with it." With this sad prediction, the owl stepped through his doorway, spread his great wings, and was gone, soaring silently down into the shadowy woods below. Mrs. Frisbee followed him out onto the limb. To her relief, Jeremy was still waiting where she had left him, though not very patiently. "We must hurry," he said. "It's almost dark. I'm not supposed to be out so late." Mrs. Frisbee, who had the same feeling, climbed on his back, much less afraid now, for 2 reasons. First, she was getting used to air travel. Second, since the woods below them were dark, she could no longer see how far away the ground was. "He talked to you for a long time," said Jeremy as they flew. "Did he tell you anything that will help?" "I don't know," said Mrs. Frisbee. Since the owl had brought up the matter of secrecy, and had, in fact, been secretive himself, she was not sure how much she should tell Jeremy. "Why don't you know?" "I mean, he told me some things, but I don't know whether they'll help or not." She decided to counter with a question of her own. "What does 'in the lee' mean?" Jeremy, being like all birds knowledgeable about the wind, knew the answer to this. "It means the calm side, the side the wind doesn't blow from. When there's a strong wind, if you fly up to the barn from the lee, so you don't get bashed into the wall. My father taught me that." "I see," said Mrs. Frisbee, and she became more puzzled than ever. What had the wind to do with it? "He told me," she said finally, deciding it could do no harm, "to go and see the rats." "The rats?" Jeremy was startled. "But they don't have anything to do with us." "I know, but he thought they might help." "What could they do?" "He thought they might move my whole house. But how they could do it, I can't imagine." "Oh, I don't doubt that they could," said Jeremy. "Everyone knows, at least all the birds know, that the rats can do things. They're up to something. Nobody is quite sure what. For one thing, they're building themselves a new house way back in the woods over to the mountains. They've even made quite a big clearing near it. I'd show you, but it's too dark now. They used to carry food like the rest of us, but now we see them with other things, pieces of metal and bits of machinery, and things I can't even recognize. They take them up into that rose bush, and what happens to them I don't know, but the owl knows more than most. I suspect he's had some dealings with them. Just the same, I've never heard of their helping anybody but themselves." "Neither have I, but I'm going to ask them anyway. There isn't anyone else to ask." By the time they reached the garden, it had almost gone completely dark, and Jeremy could not linger. "Good night, Jeremy," said Mrs. Frisbee, feeling almost affectionate towards the crow. "Thank you for helping me, and for waiting to bring me back." "You're welcome," said Jeremy. "If you need me again, just ask. After all, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here to ask." And he flew off into the darkness, the last crow to get home that night. Whew. Okay. It is now 11:11 here on the East Coast, and this is where we will leave it. Next Sunday we'll pick up with the chapter titled "In the Rosebush." I can't. My voice is giving out. I wish I could. I would sit here and read the whole thing if I really could, but my voice is starting to give out. But there is 420 of you in here. What? Y'all are crazy, but I love all of you. Seriously. I start, so just so you're all aware, do a little outro here. I do these every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I go for about 2 hours. This is my Sunday night bedtime stories. On
Wednesdays, I do a different live. It is also at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is called Story Time with Undead Papa. And that's me. That night, on Wednesday nights, we read more science fiction, fantasy type of stuff. I read H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, that kind of thing. Read some great stories, but they can be a little spooky. Last week, I think I left everybody they had to turn their lights, turn all the lights in the house on. So I love having everybody come in on Wednesdays and Sundays. Sundays are my favorite because they're just such a great group of people coming in. You guys are really building a wonderful community. I'm just here reading. You guys are really doing the work and coming in. I did start offering subscriptions to my channel. It's $2.99 a month. For that, you get some cool Undead Papa styled stickers. There's also a subscriber only space, and that yes, you did. You turned them on. And also that subscriber only space will be where you guys help me continue to build this up and decide what stories to do and all of those things. It's something that this is something I really enjoy doing, and that those subscriptions and the gifts and all of this stuff, it actually helps me keep the lights on and a roof over my head. So this is wonderful. So I saw somebody, let me just make sure, let's see. Oh, Grateful Girl, Piers Anthony, Xanth series is wonderful. Yeah, I actually just started listening to the audiobook of On a Pale Horse, book one of the Incarnations of Immortality, which is a fantastic series. I haven't read it since I was a teenager. So, but you'd be surprised how good their reading language is. But anyway, thank you for being here. It is just truly, this has been my biggest live ever. DK, yes it was. Yes it was. And it's all thanks to you guys. I mean, I show up and I read. You guys come in, and with all the likes and the shares and the gifts, and I can't thank you enough for building this with me. So I will leave you with what I always leave you with. Please be kind to each other, and be kind to yourself, because kindness matters, and so do you. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Good night.